with its own base. Half of the Democratic Party, or roughly half the Democratic Party, felt like the DNC was unfairly tipping the scales in the last presidential election, trying to get Hillary Clinton nominated, trying to hurt Bernie Sanders. So you start with that bad blood. And really, there's just been a clash between these two sides that has resumed. The hostilities that had been put aside at the Democratic Convention in 2016 resumed the minute that Donald Trump was elected. This huge battle for the soul of the Democratic Party between the Clinton-type folks and the Sanders folks. And Tom Perez is in the middle of that, and he's gotten very explicit instructions from President Clinton, as we write in the paperback extension of the original book. He's gotten instructions from Bill Clinton not to let the party go to the Bernie Sanders folks.
Think about that for the moment. Think about that. This is the guy who wrote the book Shattered. Shattered is an amazing book. You find all sorts of things in Shattered. You learn that a day or so after losing the election, that Hillary and her team wanted to get across to media and to other Democrats that she didn't lose because she was a horrible candidate. She didn't lose because she chose Tim Kaine. She didn't lose because he cheated Bernie Sanders. She didn't lose because she was the most hated candidate of any of the candidates, with the exception of Donald Trump. She didn't lose because she didn't go to Wisconsin. Nope. Those weren't the reasons she lost. She wasn't lose because Republicans were shaving off the vote totals in some of the various areas. She didn't lose because her last name was Clinton and her husband passed NAFTA. Nope, that's not why she lost at all. Russians. Fucking Comey and Russians. And you had some other Democrats who used to add Bernie Sanders into that because Bernie Sanders had the temerity to run and get the public in somewhat of an awakened state of saying, hey, that guy has a point. I mean, why don't we have $15 an hour minimum wage? Why don't we have expansion of college? Why are people going into debt in the ways they're going to debt? Maybe we should have some better worker protections and unions. Is she going to do that? No, she's not. She's not. My point is, that book is awesome. And apparently, in the addendum, or in the extension of that book, you find out that Tom Perez was told by Bill Clinton, don't let the party go to the Sanders votes. Think about it. What does that mean? What does that mean? That would mean that Bill Clinton felt Tom Perez was enough of something similar to himself, that he could have that conversation of, don't let the party go to the Sanders folks. We have an established order of things. We are third-way Democrats. We are the neoliberal wing of this particular branch. We've held this particular state of controlling the Democratic Party for 30, 40 years. Don't let it go to the Sanders folks. Supposedly, we had gotten rid of those guys who were into that kind of FDR New Deal politics. This guy's not even a Democrat. Don't let it go to him. Any conversation that I have about the DNC, anytime I'm looking at what's taking place from the standpoint of what the DNC is doing, I start here. I start with this guy telling me that Tom Perez has explicit instructions from Bill Clinton not let the party go to Sanders folks. There's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. We are a ball hurling through space. There's an asteroid that is going to hit the planet. The Democratic Party say we believe in science, and as such, we are going to do something about climate. All of the candidates give some sort of language to something about climate. They even had a forum. It was flaccid, but a forum nonetheless. But it wasn't a debate. People don't tune into forums like talking about it wasn't a debate. And there's this weird thing where Tom Perez came out of nowhere to stop even a resolution of having these guys to be able to have debates, even on their own terms. Meaning, it was an agreement of sorts that passed that particular deliberation and got into the larger party vote, where Tom Perez pushed against it. Think about that for the moment. The party that believes in science agrees that for all intents and purposes, there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. And all of us agree that we need to do something about the asteroid that is a clear and present danger that is going to hit the planet. And somebody says, the Sunrise Movement, hey, we need to have a debate about this. I mean, for fuck's sake, there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. That's a massive deal. Our habitable space on this particular planet is going to fundamentally change based upon what we've been doing on this globe. Maybe this should be something that we talk about. Tom Perez says, yeah, no. And the question becomes, well, that's weird. We agree that there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. We agree that our habitable space is going to fundamentally change as a result of being hit by that particular asteroid. We agree that we need to do something. And yet, we can't have a conversation about something that we agree is an existential threat. That's odd. That's very odd. One of the first people to talk against the motion was an oil and gas person. We know that the Democratic Party reneged on their notion of not taking money from oil and gas. And we know why. The party is broke. And because the party is broke, it can't necessarily turn away money from a good source. I want to have a conversation about the DNC being paid, or let's say agencies, Democratic agencies, think tanks, being invested in by places like Exxon Mobil, and the results of the money that's being invested in those democratic organizations. Meaning, what has it gotten? Meaning, what has the money paid for? I think you'll find this one interesting. The Democratic Party, they had a quote-unquote forum talking about climate as an existential threat, where multiple candidates got up and outright lied, something they wouldn't necessarily be able to get away with in a debate. But again, it was a forum. And despite having this forum, it almost comes across as a dog and pony show, seeing as you find that there are elements of the party still being funded by the same organizations that in large part created what the Democratic Party, at the very least, say is an existential threat. Can an organization that's paid for or paid into this particular organization, can it really be believed to actually try to change that particular instance? Meaning change how we go about our current way of affairs that is creating this particular problem when it is funded by those exact same people. And does that have anything to do with why Tom Perez fought hard not to have a climate debate? Welcome to Soapbox After Dark. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Let's call it Soapbox After Dark. It is Saturday. It is almost 11 o'clock. I am wide awake. My wife is in there watching anime. So here I am. I figured let's do the news. I saw the story the other day. I thought the story was awesome. The Democratic Party shuns a debate on climate. Oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. Despite all of the candidates saying, yeah, I'm on board for that. I mean, after all, it's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. Can we, spare a day to talk about it? The fact that there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet based on our behaviors that we need to do something about? I don't know, man. Maybe not. I don't think that's a good idea. And Simone Sanders, despite what Biden said, came out and argued against it. That woman used to work for Bernie Sanders. It's amazing how much little cash and the potential for being in the White House can do for a person and changing their world view. The Republican position, whatever you want to think of it, however grotesque you want to think it is, however dangerous you want to think it is at the very least logically consistent. We don't think it's real, so we ain't got to do shit about it. I don't like that position. I think that position entirely ignores the science on it. But fair enough. It's logical at the very least. There's no problem, so I don't have to do anything about the problem. The Democratic position to me makes no sense. And it angers me, honestly, because it makes no sense. It's like we were watching a movie last night, and at the very end, it literally goes off into nonsense, and it pisses you off for the rest of the part. The same thing here. We believe that climate change is an existential threat. Great. Everybody's on the same page. All right. However, we don't believe we can talk about this in a debate because we don't want to prejudice any of the other campaigns. What? You're telling me that you believe something is literally going to change life on the entirety of the globe for the worse. However, you do not, for whatever reason, believe we can talk about that particular item. That is massively inconsistent. And so I'm stuck with this notion of why. Tom Perez goes back on the money, accepts money from oil lobbyists. And then there's this. PPI, Progressive Policy Institute, Free energy trade. Time to lift the oil export ban. Does it have anything to do with these guys getting $50,000 from Exxon? Does it have anything to do with these guys getting $50,000 from Exxon? And I love the propaganda lingo of Progressive Policy Institute while taking money from these particular types and parroting the stuff. The world is at stake. Literally, the world is at stake. And quote unquote Progressive Policy Institute is now saying, hey, we need to, lift the oil export ban. We need to do something about that. It just so happens that position also is with the oil and gas industry. But, we're progressive and this is our policy position. The money that these guys got. And The Intercept broke the story. Right here. The money that PPI got was funneled in a way that tried to avoid detection. Meaning under normal circumstances, you'd be able to see it, but in the way that they funneled the money to them, you would have not seen that it came from Exxon. They got caught. Here's another one, Third Way. Third Way also gets money from oil and gas. And what do you know? American shale gas, keeping it affordable, stable, and accessible. The think tanks being paid by these oil and gas are all of a sudden, out of the blue, parroting oil and gas testaments or their belief systems. Ultimately, what the Democratic Party established order of things and what the oil and gas company is making the argument is like, look, we could be part of the solution. We can help. We can have this new type of, oil or this new type of gas, or we can have this new type of device that sucks it. All of this other stuff, essentially to maintain their profits and to keep things, for the most part, the way it is. Now, Sanders has come out as saying, this is horrendous. And how can you ever expect this particular party, who says it believes in science, to honestly and earnestly do something about what is supposed to be a crisis when you're still accepting money from people that in large part cause the crisis, and who have a fiduciary responsibility almost to themselves to go and get more of something that's not real, even when it's destroying the world. Because, capitalism. This is amazing to me. Here's the catch. Why did Tom Perez avoid that climate debate? Is it possible, to any degree that's possible, that the DNC is hard up for cash, and so it needs to accept money from those types? And those types, I would imagine, have conversations with Tom Perez that are not necessarily on the pages of the New York Times or Washington Post. And what Tom Perez knows is, I need that money. And that debate is problematic. That's the first point. The debate is problematic from the standpoint of you have a relationship with these people who are now giving you guys cash. Maybe that's not necessarily something you want to do if you want to maintain that relationship. First. Second, don't let the party go to the Sanders types. This notion that the debate will be burdensome to some side, that it won't be fair to some side. And when you think about that, how is that the case? It's a debate, right? How can that ever be the case? How can it ever be the case that one side is prejudiced by a particular debate? You are going out and you're giving your ideas to the American public. We have a crisis. The world is literally our habitable space. A ball flying through space is in a situation that, based on the way we've lived our lives, we've adversely affected our living habitat. We need to do something about it. Great. So we need to figure out what we're going to do about it. And us, running for office, are going to tell you what we're going to do about it. And you, the audience, are going to choose the best plan for you. How can, in that process, you ever prejudice anybody? Because everybody has the same opportunity to talk about it and give their point of view on it. It does, however, make sense in the context of, if you know there's a socialist in the race, and that socialist in the race essentially is going to knock that shit out of the park. And anybody else who's on that debate stage will look lesser than. And not just lesser than, and not just anybody on the debate stage. The candidates that you are hoping will win that race, as opposed to Sanders, who you don't even consider a Democrat. Meaning you already know going in that Sanders has put out the most extravagant climate policy of any of the candidates. Nobody comes close. And the moment that you get on this stage, you have a debate about climate, the person who has that plan with Sanders' debating ability, is going to win out. Full stop. You also know that Biden is losing his marbles, and he is going to get on that stage and his eyes are going to start bleeding, or he's going to just go incoherent, or he is going to lie and he's going to get called on that lie. Whereas if he is on a forum stage, nobody is going to call Joe Biden on anything that Joe Biden is going to say, or at the very least, if they do, it's going to be gentle at most. As opposed to the debate stage, where the goal is to put your opponent down. And if your opponent lies, you're going to make it known that their opponent is lying. Is it possible that not only is it the oil and gas connections within the Democratic Party, because Biden has a slew of oil and gas connections, going to even with oil companies and the fundraiser with the guy who's an oil executive, that Biden doesn't want to claim the guy is an oil executive. He still went to the fundraiser, by the way, after that forum. Who do you think his allegiances lie with? Who? And beyond that point, if Tom Perez is looking at this situation, he already knows what is going to happen on that debate stage. It's possible. Don't let Sanders take the party. That the last thing he wants is Bernie Sanders getting ability to showcase his climate plan that he already knows is going to be better than the other Democrats, including the other leading Democrat, Joe Biden. Don't let Sanders take the party. That's the context to which I look at the Democratic Party. So yeah, I look at it as oil and gas connections, meaning this, to some degree, gives you a reality check on what the Democratic Party really is going to do about climate. But Obama was God of oil. Joe Biden has Obama's contacts. Anybody who believes Joe Biden is going to do anything real on climate is grossly mistaken. But I don't necessarily think that's the end-all be-all on why people vote, and will be the end-all be-all on why people vote. But right here, Exxon Mobil is funding centrist Democratic think tanks, disclosures reveal. One last point about the Democratic Party before I move on to that point. You must understand, ultimately, this is... I'm trying to think of a contest. Essentially, you have a contest where you know one party in that contest is just going to be better than everyone else. And your goal in this is to ensure that that doesn't take place because you don't want the other members of the party looking bad. Simone Sanders coming out against it gets across everything you need to know. Because if Joe Biden was feeling confident that he would do okay in that debate, he would have been in that debate. The last thing Biden wanted to be is in that debate. That is one of his weakest areas. And the last thing he wants to do is be on a stage where Sanders eats him alive on this one specific topic. It's his weak topic. So from the perspective of Simone Sanders, oh, this is unfair, this is unfair, this is untenable, we shouldn't be doing this. From the perspective of everyone else, well, we just want to hear the climate plans in the debate. Simone Sanders has a political motive involved in the process of not having her client look bad. It has nothing to do with the climate thing at this point. It has everything to do with not making my client look bad. He wants to win. You guys want somebody who's going to do awesome on climate. He wants to win. All of the other contestants wants to win. Nobody wants to be in a contest if they're going to lose in that particular contest. And Biden already knows going into it, he is the weakest person on that stage involving climate. You have an existential threat. There's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. The Democratic Party says, we believe there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. We believe it fervently. And yet, we don't want to talk about that asteroid. I am stuck with the question of why wouldn't the Democratic Party want to have a conversation, a debate on something that is paramount, that they have also said is an existential threat, especially in a contrast to a president that says it's not real. That seems to be something that you would want to have. The Sunrise Movement has been on you and hounding you about it. It seems like something you would want to have. Everyone, for the most part in the party, I think it was like 70% of people said, yes, we want to have it. Tom Perez, no. Again, it's possible that Tom Perez is trying to protect somebody in this race or not necessarily let somebody shine. And on the second point, is it possible that the fact that the DNC has gotten rid of its ban on oil and gas lobbyists and the various think tanks like Exxon is funding various think tanks? And again, it paid off handsomely when these think tanks start advocating those positions. Now think for yourself for the moment, and I'll end it here. Why would an oil company give money to the Democratic Party if indeed the Democratic Party was going to somehow curtail those particular companies, meaning the candidates who are going to get in office? They would do that if they wanted to curb, inhibit, curtail the actions of how far the party is willing to go. Meaning, these think tanks will advocate various positions. The positions that the think tank advocate at that point is going to be pro-oil and gas, but maybe not necessarily pro-oil and gas from the standpoint of like a Republican or a conservative, but pro-oil and gas in the sense of, hey, we have ways where we can help, we can be a part of this process, etc., etc., etc. But it's still trying to get in bed with Democratic candidates where you can have some level of influence on the debate and some level of influence in the policy. The reason they're giving money is for the same reason that the United States give money to countries abroad. Influence. It's the same reason people in this country, oligarchs, give money to political candidates. Influence. It's the exact same thing. The money that is being given from these oil companies is used to influence these democratic institutions with the hope of having some people within the Democratic Party that is still taking money, that is still advocating positions, and having think tanks to back them up in the advocation of pro-oil and gas positions. Your party has been infiltrated. That's the point. Your party has been infiltrated. And there's some candidates who are more, let's say, pro-oil and gas, even though they may be taking this kind of sheep in wolf's clothing perspective while they're on the climate debate stage. And again, there is a difference between a forum where people are not going to push back on the things that you're saying as opposed to a debate where the goal is to win. I hope you understand my point. It's different. Your goal in a debate is to, if that guy lies, I'm putting that guy down. Joe Biden in that debate lied, or in that forum lied. So did Kamala Harris. Both of those people lied, flagrantly lied to a national audience. If that was a debate, that was not been something where they could have gotten away with. It looked like Tom Perez was protecting some of his candidates, in addition to the issue with the oil and gas influence within the party itself. Your party is trying to do two things at once, neither of which work in tandem. We believe that's an existential threat. The asteroid is going to hit the planet. However, we also believe that we can work with oil and gas and we shouldn't be having these climate debates and blah, 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 blah. We're going to take money from these people, but we're also, you can trust us to regulate these people. Just saying. It's not that believable at the point where you're taking cash. Also, there's a secondary thing of prosecuting oil companies. Why is it fair that us, the population, the public itself, have to pay for the brunt of climate change? And think about what I'm asking you. 70% of what we consider to be climate change is, for the most part, caused by very few companies. I think it's like 100 companies. Think about that. Everything that we're considering. When these guys are talking about, there's no issue with capitalism, and you make the point that, dumping CO2 in the atmosphere is a waste material, and yeah, we exhale it, yes, the trees inhale it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in large quantities it can't be a waste material. If you drink too much water, you will die. I promise you, there are people who've drunk too much water. Hell, there are people who get too much sunlight and die. Yes, CO2 is something that's in the air, we excrete it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not a waste material. And these companies putting it out has been dumping that stuff into our atmosphere to a point where they've become a global issue. Exxon knew about it 40 years, 50 years prior to this. And they lied and they attacked the science. Why is it our responsibility? These negative externalities. Why is it fair that we have to cover the burden for things that they profited magnificently off? They made billions off of dumping that shit into the air. And even you can make the argument that, yeah, you're providing a service, fair enough. And I would argue that I don't even want companies doing that, providing that particular service, because that's what I consider to be a vital need. But nevertheless, you're providing a service, but so what? We can hire somebody else to provide a service. I guess the issue here is you guys have made billions of dumping waste material into our atmosphere. And we, as the people of this government and other governments around the world, are getting stuck with the bill for something that they caused and profited off magnificently. Yeah, that's not fair at all. And they should be prosecuted, especially if they knew in advance that this was taking place. These groups have even come out against that. Even against that. And you wonder, does that have anything to do with the cash that these groups have been getting for them to come out, even against common sense things? You ask any random person in this country, any random person, and he said, look, if the oil and gas companies knew that what they were doing was creating climate change, should we be the ones that have to pay for it? Meaning, should your taxes go up to pay for something that they knew in advance while they were making billions of dollars? I would guarantee you that the majority of those people would say, conservative or Democrat, yeah, we shouldn't have to cover that bill. This group has progressive in its name. These guys are against it. These groups have been taking pro-gas stances. And you have to ask why. You have to ask why. I'll leave it here. I don't want this one to be too long. 25 minutes is too long. Like, share, subscribe. And by the way, this week in history, last week, let's say it this way. Last week, 89 years ago, I believe, Hitler rode through Poland and it started World War II. I tried to do this on a radio show and I was tying it into something and that went horribly awry. But people have been mentioning it. But yeah, 89 years last week? This week started the Battle of Britain. Hitler essentially is trying to have what is called Operation Sea Lion, I believe it's called, where he wants to essentially invade the shores of the UK. However, he can't invade the shores of the UK while the Navy exists. And there's this other problem of the British Air Force, meaning that Britain has amazing Navy. That's been their shield. And this is their shield right now in this current moment. Hitler feels that in order to take over or to get into Britain, you have to destroy their Air Force. Hence, today starts the Battle of Britain. Now, the thought is, if we can smash the British Air Force, they don't have any air cover. So when our ships go through, we will have air cover and we can decimate their ships while also allowing us to invade their inlands. Britain had lost a lot of material from the Dunkirk, that disaster where they were barely getting off France. And so they weren't necessarily up to snuff, meaning if Germany was able to get an attack in, Britain would not necessarily have had the material resources to deter a German attack on mainland Britain. Nevertheless, Churchill didn't surrender, and he didn't back down. And not just that, the Royal Air Force behaved admirably. I mean, you had radar that was able to tell the British pilots where they were going to be, and these guys were stretched to their ends. Like, think of a situation where your country is on the breaking point in regards to what your country is capable of doing. Hitler had this weird way of over-believing in what his military could do. And to some degree, that overbelief and that overconfidence had magnificent gains, but in some other cases, not so much. So in Britain, where he's sprawling out his military as opposed to like smashing one particular area, Britain held the line, but barely. Not to mention, Germany is attacking and Britain has home field advantage. So at the very least, any pilot that's shot down, for the most part, if he's British, well, he's on home territory. If he's German, he is not. He can be captured. Not to mention the bombers and that type of stuff, what Hitler put investment in. But the Royal Air Force held the line. But the Battle of Britain started today. And if I'm not mistaken, that was 90 years ago. Fucking fascinating. All right. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks so.